Welcome back to the Montana Real Estate Channel. That's brought to you by Siphers Family Real Estate, where we dive deep into everything regarding living in Montana, whether you're thinking about moving here or around the state. We talk about neighborhoods, lifestyle, culture, landscape, things that are fun to do, everything about Montana. And so today we're going to be comparing the cost of living between Montana and our neighbor to the west, the state of Washington. And so whether you're considering a move or just curious about how these two states stack up and compare, we'll take a comprehensive look at everything from housing, taxes, utilities, and lifestyle. If this is your first time to the channel, you'll want to tap that logo on the lower part of your screen on the right-hand side. And so you'll be notified whenever we put out a new video on the state of Montana, some of the real estate, etc. And I'm Craig Siphers. I work with my daughter Erica, who's a third-generation realtor here with Exit Realty Bitterroot South. So let's go ahead and take a look at our cost of living comparison between Montana and Washington. So let's jump right in. With housing, that's the most significant factor for most people. And in Washington, for example, it has a higher median home price than Montana. Digging a little deeper on it, the median home price in Washington throughout the state is about $600,000, whereas in Montana it sits a little closer to $450,000. Now, however, the gap widens if we get into major metropolitan areas, like, for example, Seattle. The median home price is well over $900,000. And in a place like, for example, Bozeman, one of Montana's more pricier markets, the average is closer to $600,000. And if you're looking to rent, the story's similar, with renting a two-bedroom apartment in Seattle averaging about $2,000 a month. Whereas in Montana, in a larger city, for example, like Missoula, the same rental apartment, for example, would be closer to $1,400 a month. Now, if we move to rural areas of Montana, we have offerings where you'd have, better options, of course, with homes in towns like, say, for example, Dillon or Great Falls or Helena. They are going to be far cheaper than properties in Washington's rural areas. Plus, with home appreciation rates on the rise, especially in Montana, it's important to consider for long-term investment. Consideration is property taxes. It can make a difference over the long run. In Montana, across the state, property taxes are approximately 0.83 to 0.84 property values, whereas in Washington, the property values are about 1.03%. Now, in Montana, property taxes tend to be more uniform across the state, but in Washington, taxes can vary a bit based on the county. For example, King County, where Seattle is located, property taxes can reach upwards of 1.2% of a home value. So on a $900,000 home, that'd cost you over $10,000 a year. In contrast, more rural counties in Washington might offer rates closer to the 0.85%, which is close to what Montana is, and it can be significantly lower. That can lower your yearly costs. Now, Montana also provides some tax property exemptions for certain groups, such as veterans, seniors. So that's something to keep in mind for long-term residents or those looking at, say, for example, retirement. Washington's lack of an income tax is a big draw, especially for high earners or business owners. Now, if you're in a higher tax bracket, this can save you thousands of dollars a year. But let's talk about how Montana, its income tax system, might not be as limiting as it seems. Now, Montana income tax, those rates range from 1% to 6.75%, depending on your income bracket. So for middle income earners, this generally amounts to about 4 to 5%. While that's more than Washington's 0%, the savings you get in other areas, like say, for example, property taxes and daily expenses, can offset that cost for most residents. Now, for retirees, Montana doesn't tax Social Security benefits. And there are also other deductions for retirement income. So if you're planning to retire in Montana, you might find that Montana income tax structure is more favorable than you would otherwise expect. And additionally, business owners in Montana often find lower overhead costs and minimal state regulations will make up for the income tax that they do pay. Now, another element is the fact that sales tax, that's an area where Montana shines. In fact, Montana has no sales tax. In Washington, the state's base sales tax is 6.5%, but it depends on where you live. It can go as high as 10%. And this affects everyday purchases from groceries, gas, big ticket items like electronics and furniture. In contrast, as I mentioned, Montana has no sales tax. Yeah, that's right. None. Zero. Now, for businesses, this can be a game changer. Whether you're running a retail store or service-oriented business, your customers don't have to factor in additional sales tax, making Montana a more attractive place to buy big items, certainly, or to start a business. So over time, this lends to significant savings on everyday purchases, and many people who live in Montana and are traveling back and forth will buy their big ticket items in Montana to save on the sales tax. Utility costs are another important consideration, especially in states like Montana and Washington, where you have varying climates during the various seasons. In Montana, electricity costs are a little less, lower because Montana does rely a lot on hydroelectric power as well as natural gas. But heating, especially during our cold weather months, can be significant expense. But overall, energy costs are often more manageable in Montana than compared to Washington. In Washington, utility costs can be higher, especially in urban areas where demand is greater. And additionally, Washington's climate, with its damp winters and cooler summers, can mean higher heating costs during the winter months, and then you also have cooling costs during the warmer periods. So rural residents in both states might find themselves using more wood or perhaps propane for heating. But in Montana, these resources tend to be a little cheaper and more accessible. Let's talk about transportation costs. That's a key part of everyday life. And in Washington, public transportation is widely available in urban areas, especially around Seattle, with extensive bus system, light rail, ferries, etc. But convenience does come at a cost. So public transportation in Washington can be expensive, with Seattle's monthly transit passes costing over $100. Montana, on the other hand, has fewer public transit options due to its rural nature. So most residents, of course, rely on their personal vehicles. The good news is that gas prices in Montana are typically lower than they are in Washington. And, where you have in Washington, you have high fuel taxes, which pushes the prices up. Additionally, car insurance is generally cheaper in Montana. For example, the average annual car insurance cost in Montana is around $1,500, whereas in Washington, it can climb to $1,700 or over, depending on where you live. When it comes to healthcare costs, the costs in both states are fairly comparable, but with a few important differences. In Montana, healthcare tends to be more affordable in rural areas. However, access to specialized care can be limited, which might require traveling to larger cities like, say, Missoula, Billings, Great Falls. for more complex medical needs. And in fact, there are a number of people who end up going to for example, the Seattle or Spokane areas for healthcare costs from Montana for those specialized services. In Washington, larger urban areas like Seattle and Spokane have top-tier medical facilities, but with higher costs for the services. And health insurance premiums are generally higher in Washington, especially if you live in a city, whereas in Montana, residents tend to pay slightly lower premiums, especially for those on private health insurance plans. Finally, we can talk all day about the cost of living without mentioning quality of life, but both states offer incredible access to outdoor recreation, but the lifestyle is quite different. Washington's coastal and mountainous regions provide year-round opportunities for outdoor activities, but it also comes with a more urban, fast-paced lifestyle like, for example, Seattle. In Montana, the wide open spaces and lower population density and then the slower pace of life offer a different kind of appeal. And if you're looking to avoid traffic, noise, the hustle of the big city, Montana's serene environment is unbeatable. While some areas of Montana, like for example Bozeman or Missoula, are growing rapidly, and they still maintain that small town charm despite that, and a little more relaxed atmosphere. So in conclusion, there you have it, the full breakdown of cost of living between Montana and Washington. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this video. Hope you've learned something. It's all about where you want to live. Remember, if you want to know something about specific areas in Montana, and we'll get into some costs of living across the state of Montana as well, but everything you need in order to get a hold of us is in the description below. So we invite you to send us an email, send us a text, give us a call. We'd love to be a resource for you. Siphers family has been helping folks move around the state of Montana and transition into the state of Montana since 1966. And we look forward to helping you if we can. So until next time, have a wonderful day. Enjoy the video, share it with friends, like and subscribe.